The wind was strong that morning. It howled across the open plain like a memory refusing to die, bending the tall grasses until they whispered to the earth. Far above, the old watchtower stood like a lonely finger pointing at the sky, forgotten by men, remembered by time. At its peak, the bell swayed gently on its rusted yoke, groaning with each swing. For decades, no hand had rung it. No warning had been issued. And yet today, it moved, stirred by the wind, yes, but also by something older, something that had been waiting. Below, the world began its day. Birds scattered across the sky in scattered V formations. A herd of deer emerged cautiously from the tree line. Even the insects, always first to know, buzzed low to the ground as if searching for cover. And then, the raven came. It descended not in a flurry, but in silence, its wings catching the thermal drafts like sails on a black sea. Its feathers were not just black. They shimmered with a strange oil sheen, reflecting violet and green where there should have been only shadow. It circled the tower once, then again, and on the third pass, it landed, right on the iron crossbeam, just above the bell. The moment its claws touched rusted steel, the bell froze mid-swing, not slowed, not dampened, frozen, suspended in the air, caught halfway through a chime that would never come. No sound, no echo, just the eerie stillness of something denied its purpose. The raven tilted its head once, twice. Its eye glistened, round, black, reflective. But it didn't look at the land. It looked inward, or perhaps downward, as if listening to something that spoke through stone and silence. Below, the deer stopped moving. Their ears twitched, wide eyes fixed on the tower. A hawk, mid-dive, pulled up sharply and vanished over the ridge. Even the insects vanished into the soil. All sound from the land fell away, not muffled but removed, as though erased by unseen hands. The bell still hung there, mid-air, caught in defiance of gravity, logic, and time. And the raven didn't move. Wind wrapped around the tower in confused spirals, unsure whether to push or pull, unable to dislodge the intruder from its perch. The air grew colder, just slightly, like a shadow had passed overhead, even though no clouds marred the sky. Something had shifted. Not violently, not obviously, but permanently. And it began not with thunder or fire or flood, but with one black feathered shape and one silent bell. The day continued, but nothing was the same. The bell remained frozen, and far below the tower in the green-gray valley, something else began to fall silent. It started with the stream. A narrow ribbon of water had always run from the hills down toward the plain, its babble soft but constant, a background breath of the land. But now, the water stilled. Not stopped, still. It flowed, but no longer made a sound. Pebbles no longer clattered beneath it. Froth no longer danced over rocks. Even where the stream bent and dropped into a shallow fall, it poured in silence. A doe stepped toward it. She was young, yet old enough to notice that something was missing. Her hooves brushed the grass. It didn't rustle. Her breathing, rapid, nervous, didn't fog the air, even in the morning chill. She bent her neck to drink, but the water recoiled from her mouth, repelling her like two magnets pushing away from each other. She lifted her head again, ears turning back. All around her, the woods were too quiet. No birdsong, no bugs. Even the wind had lost its voice. Across the field, a pair of foxes moved through the brush, not hunting, not wandering. Searching. One paused and looked up toward the tower, now barely visible in the haze. Its eyes narrowed, and without sound or signal, both foxes turned and ran, not toward prey, but away from the stillness. Above, the raven still hadn't moved. It sat like a sculpture, untouched by wind or sun, the iron beam beneath its talons rusting faster by the hour. Faint flakes of red-brown powder now drifted from where it perched, swirling downward and disappearing before touching the ground. The air was changing. Not thicker, not thinner, but hollow. as though something inside the sky had been scooped out and replaced with an emptiness that animals could sense, even if they couldn't name it. In the town beyond the forest, the humans hadn't noticed. Not yet. A dog refused to go outside that morning. A stable horse kicked at its stall door for hours before going completely still. Crows gathered silently on rooftops, not cawing, not moving, just watching the tower in the distance. And deep in the soil, near the roots of the oldest trees, ants paused in their tunnels. Not from fear, not from confusion, from recognition. They had felt this before. Or rather, their ancestors had, a long time ago. And when it came then, the forests died, the rivers reversed, and the sky burned blue for 7 nights. This time, it had begun with a raven, and a bell that no longer dared to sing. By noon, the sun stood directly overhead, but its light felt distant, as though it were shining through layers of unseen glass. The bell hadn't moved. Neither had the raven. From the forest below, a young man named Emil made his way up the path toward the Watchtower. He wasn't a soldier, nor a keeper of tradition. He worked as a groundsman in the village, tending to the overgrowth around the lower trail. The kind of work no one wanted, but someone had to do. He didn't know about the bell. Not yet. But something had woken him before dawn. Not a sound, but the absence of one. The stream near his cottage hadn't murmured. His goat wouldn't eat. Even the bees around his porch, usually frantic in late spring, clung to their hive in silence. He couldn't say why, but he had taken the long way to work, past the old tower no one used. Halfway up the hill, he stopped walking. There was no wind. The birds were gone. Even his own footsteps seemed hesitant, swallowed before they could echo. The air felt thick, like walking underwater. And then he saw it. The bell. Suspended, unmoving, caught in perfect imbalance. Just off vertical. Not swinging, not swaying. Frozen. Mid-swing. Emil's breath caught in his throat. Something in his body remembered a time that he could not. His legs trembled, though he was not cold. His ears rang with a sound that wasn't there. And above the bell, he saw it. The raven. It stared straight ahead, or so it seemed. But when Emil stepped forward, the raven's head turned slowly, smoothly, until one round eye met his. He stopped moving. That eye was not like other birds' eyes. It didn't reflect the world. It absorbed it. Looking into it felt like falling. It was deep, wider than its size, older than the tower beneath it. Emil wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The raven blinked once, and Emil felt something in his chest. A jolt, not of pain, but of realization. This was not just a bird. It was a witness, or worse, a messenger. And now that it had turned its gaze upon him, the silence around him deepened. Trees that had stood for centuries groaned faintly. The tower's stones cracked just slightly under the pressure of time folding in on itself. He stumbled backward, breaking eye contact. His breath returned in gasps. And just like that, the bell twitched. Not fully, just a subtle sway, as if disapproving of the moment being broken. Emil turned and ran. He didn't know why or what it meant, but some instinct buried deep in human marrow told him this was not something to stay and study, not something to report, not something to understand, just something to flee. In the village of Marillo, the hour between 3 and 4 in the afternoon passed, but no one could remember it. Not fully. Some said they were washing clothes, others that they had simply been walking between rooms. A few remembered beginning a sentence but not finishing it. One boy swore he had counted to 27 and then woke up in a different part of the house. No one spoke of it immediately, but as dusk approached, unease moved among them like fog. Clocks seemed slower, though they all told the right time. The baker's fire had burned too long, charring the crust of every loaf. The schoolteacher found herself staring at the same page for what felt like an entire day. A dog barked at the same patch of grass until its voice failed. Something in the rhythm of time had glitched, but not in a violent way. It had simply thinned, and at the center of that thinning was the tower. Still, the bell had not moved again. The raven remained perched like a judge above the land, its gaze fixed somewhere beyond sight, as if it watched something unfold in a realm just beyond the veil of waking. In the church square, a group of elders gathered quietly, not in fear, but in ritual. They had lived long enough to recognize the shape of this kind of silence. Not absence, containment, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting. One of them, old Merrick, whispered, "The bell never failed." Not even when the storm took the steeple. Another replied, "It didn't fail. It stopped." The difference mattered. By evening, the birds still hadn't returned. Not even the ones that slept under rooftops. Their nests were cold. The swallows had left without warning. The chimney sweep found a dead starling with its wings folded. Not broken, just shut off. And as the light faded, the villagers finally looked toward the tower together. Not just with eyes, with awareness. They saw the frozen bell. They saw the dark figure still perched above it. And they knew. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't mechanical failure. It was a warning. But from what, or from whom, no one could say. The bells of other villages still rang. The sun still set in the west. The roads still led where they always had. But Merlo had been marked. And as the sky darkened to slate and shadows pooled deeper than they should, one question echoed silently in every mind. If time itself can go missing, what else can be taken? It was never meant to be climbed again. The watchtower, once proud and purposeful, had long since rotted beneath its stone skin. The ladder inside had collapsed decades ago. Ivy now choked the outer frame, and rust had swallowed the bolts holding its spine together. But that night, under the weight of stillness, someone climbed it anyway. Her name was Lisa. She had once been a bellkeeper's daughter. When she was small, her father would carry her up part of the tower on his shoulders, laughing as the wind pulled at his cloak. That laughter had died with him, long before the raven came. But Lisa remembered the sound, and she remembered the way the bell used to sing when the world still listened. Now, the bell was silent. The raven watched, and Lisa, driven by a question she couldn't name, stepped onto the first stone of the tower's outer ledge, her fingers gripping the old railing. She climbed in silence. Each step upward made the wind colder. The air didn't whistle, it pressed, like climbing into water, or into thought. Below, the village lights flickered softly. Above, the stars thinned to a chalky smear. By the time she reached the mid-level platform, she could no longer hear her own breath. There was no sound at all, not from her boots on the wood, not from the rusted chains of the bell, not even from her heartbeat. As though she had stepped into a place not just beyond hearing, but beyond cause and effect. The raven turned its head. It had not moved for days, and yet it turned, not with curiosity, not with threat, with recognition. It knew her. Lisa stood below it now, one level down, staring up. The bell loomed beside her, suspended mid-swing, its tongue barely visible, not frozen by ice or rust, frozen by will, by presence. She reached out. The air around the bell was wrong, not hot, not cold, but charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Her fingertips hovered inches from the iron surface and stopped. A sound, faint, far, impossible. A heartbeat, but not hers. Not human. It came from within the bell. And then a second sound, not from the bell, but from beneath her boots. The stones of the tower, the ancient spine of the structure, groaned deep in their marrow. Not from weight, from memory. The tower wasn't crumbling, it was shifting. And then, the stones changed color, just faintly, beneath the moss and grit. Not darker, not lighter. Older, like bones that had never truly been stone, only pretending to be. The tower was not made of rock. It was made of something else. Lisa stepped back. The raven flapped once, not to flee, not to fly, but in approval. A gust of wind rose with unnatural sharpness, wrapping her like a cloak. She turned, shielded her eyes. When she looked again, the raven was gone. The bell still hung mid-swing, but Lisa no longer felt like she was standing at the top of a tower. She felt like she was inside a rib cage, something vast, something that remembered her, and something that had just begun to wake up. The raven was gone. Not a feather left behind. No whisper of wings, no gust to mark its exit. One moment it had loomed above the bell like a harbinger. The next, it was simply not there. And with it, something shifted in the silence. Not relief, not release. Descent. Lise clung to the railing, her breath returning like a forgotten rhythm. The air grew warmer, not in temperature, but in texture, thick with something that hadn't been in the world before. Like sound returning in reverse, one layer at a time. She looked down, toward the village. It was no longer lit. The lamps that once burned in the square and along the roads had extinguished all at once. Not doused, absorbed. Windows were dark. The hills, darker still. The stars above, hidden now behind a mist that hadn't risen but fallen. From where she stood, she could see it. A faint tremor across the soil. Not an earthquake. Not even a movement. A shimmer. The silence had begun to sink. It was as though the stillness that had frozen the bell, that had held back time, now sought something beneath the earth. And in doing so, it pulled everything with it. At the foot of the tower, grass crumpled inward. Soil lost its shape. Rocks began to soften, their edges becoming smooth like ancient river stones, even though no water touched them. And then, the sound returned. Not music, not voice. A low groan, deep and sour, like bones grinding in a forgotten jaw. It rose not from above, but from below, from far, far below. The base of the tower pulsed once, subtly, like a breath beneath a blanket of dust. The villagers, unaware of Lisa's perch above, began to step out of their homes. Some fell to their knees. Others stood still, arms limp at their sides. No one screamed. Not because of calm, because their voices no longer reached the air. The silence was devouring volume now, not just sound. And still, the bell hung in its arrested swing. It did not chime. It did not fall. It was not a prisoner. It was a seal. Lisa turned her gaze to the base of the tower again, and that's when she saw it. The roots, not of trees, but of the tower itself. Black, brittle tendrils curling from the foundation, snaking outward like veins, diving into the earth. The tower was no longer standing. It was feeding, and it was feeding the silence into the soil. Far below the plain, where no spade had ever struck, something was awakening. Not because it had been called, but because the bell had not. The bell had been stopped. The seal had been broken. And now, the silence would no longer stay still. The bell had never been meant to ring. It had been forged not in a blacksmith's fire, but beneath the mountain, cast from metal older than memory, alloyed with dust taken from the mouths of sleeping gods. Those who built the tower did not build it up. They built it over. A cover. A lock. A signal, yes, but not to warn others. To warn it. And now the bell was still. Mid-swing. Mute. And what it had held beneath the earth was stirring. From her perch, Lisa watched the roots spread farther, faster. The ground was no longer breaking. It was peeling, as if the earth were a painting being removed to reveal something underneath. Soil gave way to veins of lightless stone, black and wet and pulsing. The village had fallen into a hush so profound, it felt like the land itself no longer acknowledged the presence of people. In the chapel, the altar cracked down the center. In the barn, every mirror fogged from within. In the well, water began to spiral upward. The bell quivered once. Its chains trembled. metal barely visible beneath layers of rust and forgotten symbols. For a moment, it seemed it might swing again, that it might fulfill its ancient duty. But the raven had left, and its silence remained. Below, the roots converged. They did not spread forever. They gathered, at a point near the tower's base, like a funnel, a focus. The earth buckled and then split, revealing a shaft. It was not carved, it was not formed, it was remembered, as if the land had simply stopped pretending it was whole. And from the shaft came a sound, not heard but felt, a frequency that stirred deep inside the bone, a chime without tone, a sound that predated sound, something that lived in the marrow of everything alive. It wasn't malevolent, it was hungry. Lisa turned from the tower's edge and descended, not with panic, but purpose. She understood now what her father had kept from her, what every bellkeeper since the founding had known and feared and chosen to forget. The bell was not made to ring, it was made to prevent ringing, to keep the deeper bell, the one below the soil, from waking. And now, the roles were reversing. As Lise reached the bottom, the villagers stood around the tower, silent, still, waiting. The sky had dimmed into a strange violet, not dusk, not storm, but some third state. And then, a single note, low and pure, rolled out from beneath the tower. Not from the broken bell above. From within the earth, the deep bell had spoken. Some wept, some smiled. One man collapsed to his knees and whispered a name he had never learned. The animals fled. The stream flowed backward. The trees leaned away from the tower, and from the shaft came light. But not light made of brightness, light made of memory, of endings. The seal was broken. The silence had become song, and the song was not for the living. The bell above never moved again. The raven never returned, and the world beyond Merlo would not remember what happened there. But something old had risen, and the bell had done all it could. It had fallen silent, not in failure, but because it had run out of time.